Global business, boosting integration. Premier Li Qiang highlights China's strong ties with Southeast Asia as the ASEAN summit draws to a close. Deepening cultural exchange. The 6th Silk Road International Cultural Expo wraps up in the city of Dunhuang, Gansu Province. Growing ties. The China-Australia high-level dialogue has been held in Beijing in a show of growing ties between the two countries. Hello and welcome to this edition of Global Business on CGTN. I'm Guanxin in Beijing. The ASEAN summit has concluded in Indonesia's capital Jakarta on Thursday. Chinese Premier Li Qiang participated in the 18th East Asia Summit earlier today in Jakarta. He stressed the importance of the summit in addressing new challenges and urged it to play a greater role in development, strategic dialogue, and ASEAN leadership. Li expressed China's commitment to deeper cooperation on global initiatives proposed by President Xi Jinping. He also highlighted progress in South China Sea conduct negotiations, calling upon all nations to take a responsible stance for history and humanity by protecting the marine ecosystem. And now the digital economy has become a new chapter for China-ASEAN cooperation. China and ASEAN countries have signed a series of cooperation documents to speed up the alignment of their digital development strategies. ASEAN is expected to see its digital economy grow nearly sixfold from $31 billion in 2015 to $197 billion in 2025. And according to a report related to RCEP members, the cross-border e-commerce index for 15 RCEP countries has grown at an average annual rate of 30% over the past 3.5 years, while ASEAN countries have grown at an average annual rate of more than 51%. The time is right to deepen China-ASEAN digital economic cooperation. The agreement, known as the Regional Payment Connectivity Initiative, was launched on the sidelines of the G20 summit last year. And during the recent ASEAN summit in May, the leaders reaffirmed their commitment and promised to expand payment connections to all 10 member nations. And our Mira Lu has more.
Instant cross-border money transfers, and the ability to make payments in your own currency using QR code when traveling to participating nations. These are some of the benefits of the new Regional Payment Connectivity Initiative, or RPC, which has been signed by 6 ASEAN members. These nations include Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, the Philippines, Indonesia, and Vietnam. The goal is to make cross-border transactions faster, cheaper, more transparent, and more inclusive.
Traditionally, cross-border payments have been plagued with 3 or 4 issues. One is the cost. Second is the speed. Third is transparency. Will my money get there? Will it not get there? Where is it in the journey? And last is access. What we believe is making this solution accessible from a $10 payment to a $1 million payment has been something that we're trying to provide.
Card payments usually involve fees imposed by third-party companies like Visa and MasterCard. Under RPC, the regional central banks set exchange rates directly. Experts say that the scheme helps reduce dependency on the US dollar and strengthens local currency.
We have to rely on US dollar and the SWIFT system. But especially last year, because of the Ukraine war, people realized that, the SWIFT system could be shut down for certain countries. All of a sudden, it could be dangerous if you over-rely on this so-called existing structure. This, ASEAN RPC, I would say, is try to create an alternative to the existing system.
What could prove to be a challenge, though, would be the diversity of the ASEAN nations in terms of their economic status, population size, as well as regulatory framework.
We need a safe system that avoids money laundering and things like that. So I think bringing organizations and countries into other types of instant payment multilateral agreements, we need to be confident that each country does its part. That is a real concern across various markets in the world.
Experts say for schemes like RPC to work, all the players in the ecosystem, corporations, individuals, and governments have to be on board. While there may be some initial hesitancy in changing behaviors around payments, consumers and SMEs are expected to benefit the most in the long run. Mira Lu, CGTN, Singapore.
And now for more discussions on China's trade with ASEAN countries, we're joined by Kazim Mahmood, a foreign affairs analyst based in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Thank you for joining us. So, Premier Lee recently spoke at the East Asia Summit. What were some of the key highlights you have observed and some main messages from his remarks?
I think he was on a diplomatic offensive, and he spoke mostly about the diplomatic approach to the issues between China and ASEAN, in particular the South China Sea. He conveyed a very important message about the support for China for the ASEAN centrality, which is very important to ASEAN, of course. But in this case, he is talking about ASEAN taking the lead instead of leaving the lead to some ASEAN countries at a certain point of time. So what he means is ASEAN should be more powerful, more strong, and be able to dominate in the multilateral type of region that he's talking about. That is what I think are the main points that he conveyed during the event.
Well, the East Asia Summit led to some tangible outcomes on energy, food security, and climate action. In your view, what is the future potential for cooperation between China and ASEAN in these areas, as well as some emerging industries and coastal economic development?
I think there is huge potential. China has always been in great support of the ASEAN region in terms of business development, business cooperation, and bilateral trade between ASEAN countries and trade between ASEAN and China. China has always been at the forefront to try to develop the aspects of business in these circumstances. Even during the COVID, China has been very helpful for the ASEAN. So I believe that ASEAN is talking to China. Most of the ASEAN countries want something from China, of course, because China is a big country, big economy, and it has a huge market. And ASEAN has a huge population altogether. And what they want is modern economy. And modern economy is based on mostly on green economy, on battery-operated cars, electric vehicles. And I think for business purpose, during this summit, they discussed more about electric vehicles, and probably they want more from China on this aspect, more help, because China is cheaper and reliable technology compared to some other countries.
Well, China-ASEAN economic integration has deepened substantially in the past few years. How important is this relationship for supporting growth and development globally?
Well, the problem with the ASEAN is that it is looking at avenues of progress, of growth. And China is the biggest country in the region here compared to other countries. And trade and deals between China and ASEAN are always there, always getting better, like you said. But there are major problems between ASEAN and China. So what ASEAN wants, I would rather focus on what ASEAN wants, and ASEAN would want China to own on its responsibility in the South China Sea. And the Prime Minister of China has made it clear that he wants diplomatic solutions instead of anything else. And he wants ASEAN to come at the forefront to bring these solutions with the DOC documents that they want to sign soon. It has been on the table for a long time. And in this aspect, I think ASEAN wants China to also give assurances to ASEAN that when ASEAN decides to deal with more business with China, there will be peace, there will be security, and there will be prosperity. And I believe these are the three important things that ASEAN countries want from China.
Well, thank you so much for sharing with us your insights. That was Kazim Mahmood, a foreign affairs analyst from Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia.
Thank you very much.
And now we're heading for a short break. Still to come on the program. Deepening cultural exchange. The 6th Silk Road International Cultural Expo wraps up in the city of Dunhuang, Gansu Province.
We're stepping out of the studio to take you on a brand new journey along the Belt and Road.
We travel to over 20 countries on 5 continents. Follow our cameras to all the interesting places, major cities, remote corners.
And so many more, we document not only massive infrastructures,
but also cultural links that bound the community with a shared future.
We invite you on the new Silk Road as we mark 10 years of the Belt and Road Initiative.
Welcome back. The 6th Silk Road International Cultural Expo has just concluded in Dunhuang City in China's Gansu province. Our Michelle Vandenberg brings us some of the achievements revealed during the expo.
The 6th Silk Road International Cultural Expo has just concluded in the stunning Dunhuang City in China's Gansu province. The expo has become a platform for dialogue, cooperation, cultural integration, industry linkage, and sharing of achievements for countries along the Silk Road. It has made positive contributions to promoting cultural, economic, and trade exchanges and cooperation among countries and regions along the route. Besides the 1,200 guests and close to 400 journalists attending the event, 119 companies were also invited. 26 key projects were signed worth 10.6 billion yuan. During the forum, the Belt and Road Initiative continued to be a hot topic, once again gathering extensive consensus from the international community. Participants agree that the Belt and Road Initiative is in line with world peace and development and promotes the building of a community with a shared future for mankind.
During this year's Cultural Expo, many experts shared their insights on the role of the country's heritage in promoting the tourism sector and economic development. Take a listen.
Cultural and creative industries contribute to the economy of Gansu, its export earning, and they create a lot of jobs to people. So what the World Bank do comes with 3 pillars. One is to revitalize all the towns and villages where creators produce and establish creative centers so can be added to the tourism itinerary of Gansu and give those creators access to finance, access to market, access to knowledge, access to skills, incubation. And that's why we brought together UNESCO and UNWTO to give such training capacity building to Gansu, but also help to transfer Gansu knowledge globally to other countries along the ancient Silk Road.
UNESCO very much promotes the cultural heritage for economic development, especially in relations to the communities. So there have been many activities going around the globe, including many in China as well, to use culture or living heritage or world heritage for poverty reduction, for sustainable tourism. Like in China, for example, has been doing remarkably well in the field of using ICH for rural revitalization to bring additional jobs to the rural communities so they do not have to migrate to the cities, to bring more incomes to the families who are living in rural area, and then to create tourism.
Cultural heritage, including artifacts and natural landscapes, intangible cultural heritage, plays an increasingly important role in outbound tourism. This is particularly because the formal resources mentioned are relatively fixed, including cultural and natural resources, while intangible cultural heritage provides interactive and experiential opportunities. Therefore, for tourists, the demand for this type of travel is growing. ICH can enhance their interest in tourism.
It's been 10 years since the Belt and Road Initiative was first put forward. Over the past decade, 152 countries and 32 international organizations have signed up to the initiative. The CGTN's reporters have traveled to 22 Belt and Road nations across Asia, Africa, Europe, and Latin America to uncover stories of collaboration, transformation, and people-to-people exchanges under the framework. Setting off from the Honjara Pass, straddling the China-Pakistan border, a team is on a trip westward to Pakistan, Turkey, Greece, and Tanzania. On the 4th day of this special segment, we join our reporter Cao Chufeng. She visits the Carrot Hydropower project in Pakistan, the first large-scale hydropower investment under the initiative. Cao Chufeng has more.
And now at Kairos Hydropower Project, it was the first hydropower investment construction project under the Belt and Road Initiative. It's also the first hydropower project under the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. It's now been put into use for more than 1 year, and statistics shows it can meet the electricity demands of more than 5 million local people. It's also a well-integrated project of the General Plan of Pakistan that tries to upgrade its energy system into one that's more reliant on renewable resources. Statistics shows right now 1/5 of electricity demand in Pakistan are met by using coal, and majority of these coal are imported from overseas. Increasing the use of renewable resources, not only it would help protect the environment, it also means maximum use of local resources and reduced costs. And now another thing I find very interesting while staying at Kairos is how this project has transformed the livelihood as well as the local economic dynamic in nearby area.
China's foreign trade in the first 8 months this year is relatively stable compared to the same period last year. The overall trade volume from January to August came in just over 27 trillion yuan, slightly down 0.1% from the same period last year. The yuan-denominated exports rose 0.8%. And while yuan-denominated imports declined 1.3%. The trade surplus stood at 3.86 trillion yuan, and for August alone, yuan-denominated trade saw a monthly jump of 3.9% despite slipping 2.5% on a yearly basis. And earlier, our CGTN opinion editor Huang Jiyuan talked with John Ross, former director of economic and business policy for the mayor of London, on the lies about the Chinese economy seek to demoralize and misdirect. Let's take a listen.
So in your recent article published by Guancha, you've made a very detailed and data-driven analysis of the Chinese economy, and you compared it with many other major economies and developed countries. And you came to the conclusion that, and I'm paraphrasing here, China's economic performance far surpasses other major countries, and there are certain motives behind the spread of this China in decline argument. So what are some of those motives, and what are they trying to achieve?
Well, the first thing that they're trying to do is conceal the facts. I mean, the situation is extremely clear. If we take the last 4 years, that is to take in the pandemic and the period after the pandemic, China's economy grew for 19.2%. That's total for the 4 years. The US grew 7.5%. That means China's economy grew 2.5 times as fast as the United States. And the United States was the best performing of all the developed economies. So China outperformed the US by far. And in fact, if you take the per capita GDP, China's economy was growing more than 3 times as fast as the United States. But you have an absolutely bizarre situation where instead of discussing why is China's economy far outperforming all the other major economies, a very weird discussion is taking place in the US media about how the US is doing very well and China is not. And this is completely out of line with the facts. There's 2 reasons, I think. One is subjective and one is objective. The subjective one is that they want to try to persuade foreign companies not to invest in China by saying China's economy is not doing very well, etc., etc. It's completely untrue, but nevertheless, people may read these things in the media. And secondly, they want to try to spread some demoralizing rumors in China or something like that. That's subjective ones. The second one, however, is that they want to try to get China to adopt the wrong economic policies, because if China's economy is growing much faster than the Western economy, if the United States said to people in China, look, you should slow down your economy until it performs as badly, as slowly as a Western economy, everyone would laugh at this. They'd think it was ridiculous. So therefore, what they have to pretend is they have to pretend that the Western economies are doing better, growing faster than China, which is absolutely contradictory to the facts.
And now we're heading for a short break. Still to come on the program. For the first time in 3 years, the China-Australia high-level dialogue has been held in Beijing in a show of growing ties between the 2 countries.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business. Only on CGTN.
Welcome back. China-Australia high-level dialogue has been held in Beijing in a show of growing ties between the two countries. Our Sun Ye has more.
The 7th meeting of the China-Australia high-level dialogue was held in Beijing on Thursday, 3 years since the last time it met. The talks come as bilateral relations in the areas of diplomacy, defense, education, and other areas have warmed and improved, reflecting what's been described as good momentum, which China's former Foreign Affairs Minister says both sides should treasure and nurture.
We should treasure the mutually beneficial relations that we have now. The essence of China-Australia relations is mutual benefit and win-win cooperation. Treating China as a threat is a strategic misjudgment. China's development goal is natural rejuvenation and to do a good job at its own affairs, not to surpass or replace anyone. China's development needs a peaceful environment, and China's development will also contribute to the peace and stability of the world. We have never threatened Australia in the past and will not do so in the future. This kind of mutually beneficial relationship is worth cherishing.
Li says a healthy, robust relationship is in the interest of both nations and their people. He also invited attending delegates from the political, commercial, academic, and cultural sectors to pool their wisdom to maintain that good momentum.
As a former trade minister, I know how important Australia and China are to each other as economic partners. Our complementarity of our economies has brought great benefit to both our peoples over the years. I welcome the recent positive developments in the bilateral relationship, but we know that there is more work to do.
Chinese experts say with attendees, including former ministers from both Labour and Liberal parties in Australia, the Australian delegation reflects the country's bipartisan efforts to promote trade and economic ties with China, as well as people-to-people exchanges. Sun Ye, CGTN, Beijing.
Moving on to other headlines we're tracking at this hour. China's foreign exchange reserves came in at $3.16 trillion at the end of August, down by nearly 1.38% from a month ago. The decrease was mainly due to the combined impact of currency translation and asset price changes, according to the foreign exchange regulator. In German, industrial production fell by 0.8% from the month before. The figure fell for the third consecutive month. High inflation and energy prices have taken a toll on Europe's largest economy's industrial sector. British house prices fell by 4.6% on a yearly basis in August. That marked the fastest decrease since 2009, reflecting the increasing impact of higher interest rates, the mortgage lender Halifax said on Thursday. The UK's largest local authority has announced it's effectively bankrupt. Birmingham City Council has an £87 million hole in its budget, and that means a freeze on new spending and potential cuts for vital services. It's part of a bigger trend with other English local authorities which are also running out of money, and Paul Hawkins reports.
People here are anxious. Their city council has run out of money. It's $109 million short in its budget, and here's why. The council has paid over $1 billion in the past 10 years, correcting inequality in staff pay. And on top of that, it's got $850 million left to settle. In addition to that, it's going to spend over $100 million correcting an IT system that was supposed to cost just 23. The result? It's going to have to freeze new spending and instead concentrate on the services it has to legally provide, such as libraries. How would you feel about that if the library was open less, for example?
I think it's a great resource. I know a lot of students use it to revise, so I think that will have a huge impact on everyone in Birmingham.
The library is really important. It's part, it's part and parcel of Birmingham. Central Library, it's been here forever. Back when it used to be near Hooters years ago to the new building. Yeah. It's part and parcel of Birmingham city centre.
The UK's main opposition party, Labour, runs the council.
For anybody who's suffering across the city, anything that impacts them that the council has done wrong, we'll hold up our hands and we will say sorry for.
But that hasn't stopped the council's 1 million residents, or Brummies as they're affectionately known, worrying about where the axe may fall.
Nobody really knows how this is going to affect the daily lives of residents. Services, the most vulnerable, where the bins are going to be collected, council tax is going to go up, and the most vulnerable people in the city will be disproportionately affected, so the elderly, children with special education needs.
Critics of the UK's Conservative government blame the 40% reduction in grants for local councils over the past 10 years. It's left councils trying to raise revenue locally to plug the gap, either by raising taxes, cutting spending, or investing in things like solar farms and property. Investments that have already bankrupted other councils and more are set to follow. This is a growing problem for the UK government because it's about the things that directly affect our lives: refuse collections, libraries, leisure centres and social care. As we start the run-up to next year's likely general election, it's another growing headache for Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. Paul Hawkins, CGTN, Birmingham.
And that would do it for this edition of Global Business here on CGTN. Thank you for being with us. The Hub with Wang Guan is coming up next. Stay tuned.